This is Ryan. I'm doing this video because I have a lot of frustrations about how people refer to the DC films. There's so many people just like brainwashed into Marvel movies that they just pretend they have no idea what's going on, and they have the weirdest excuses as to how they refer to these films. So I thought I would kind of give you my take on how I classify these films. My biggest thing is how people refer to the DC films as the DCEU, or the DC Extended Universe, when really that refers to everything, because everything can be in the Extended Universe, so I don't get why that even caught on in the first place. I think the history of saying the DCEU comes from one publication in a magazine that referred to it that way, from a writer that just didn't know anything about comics. I really wanted to come on here and correct them. Send this out to your friends, send this out to anyone that's even a little bit confused about the DC films. If you do enjoy them, I think you'll pretty much understand what I'm going for here. If you're not a huge fan of the DC movies, maybe this can help you kind of get a base as to what to go into and where the frame of reference is. DC has two different ways of going about films. For that, I'm going to get started with what people refer to as the DCEU. That's the last time I'm going to say that in this video. I'm going to refer to those films as the DC United Series, okay? The DCU Series. Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Justice League, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, all of those films, Shazam, Black Adam, Suicide Squad, The Suicide Squad. All of those movies are connected, and it's very obvious that they are. A lot of people like to pretend that for some reason they don't know which movies are connected and which ones aren't and that type of thing. It's really obvious. You know that Wonder Woman is from the Justice League movie. You know that Aquaman is from that same movie. I would not really call it a universe because that kind of puts it into the Marvel camp of things, and I don't think that's really an equivalent comparison as to how they go about it. Because even in this connected universe, the DC films are really led by their creators. It's not really led by a producer. It's not led by the business. Zack Snyder himself and a lot of other directors, they credit Warner Brothers with saying, these are really about creators. Whoever comes in with a great pitch, and if they can fit it into a connected universe, it's great. But they're not predisposed to denying a good pitch if it doesn't fit into the universe. Because they can also have a DC independent film or a DC independent series. This is the second route that DC has. Separate from the United series, we have DC independent films. That would be like Joker. That would be like the Batman coming up. This would not be the DCU series. I would call these DCI films. DC independent films. The Batman, for example, there is no Justice League in the Batman. There's no magic. There's no crazy alien technology in Batman that I know of. This is a real, down-to-earth, in-the-city project. These are auteur-led, very gritty, more adult films. The purpose of these is for creators to explore. They don't have to fit into any specific larger universe. These are just one-off films or one-off series of films that really can just be their own stories, their own deeper explorations of character. Stuff like Joker, stuff like the Batman, these are DC independent projects. I'm also going to take this opportunity, since I'm talking about the classification of these films, to maybe test you a little bit, because I have some inclusions in the DC United series that maybe some other people have some issue with, and I'm going to try to make my case for them here. Most people would say the DC United series would start with Man of Steel. And I thought that as well. But looking back on the history of the films and where they're going, especially with Flash, opening up the universe into a multiverse world, I think we can offer ourselves a little bit more inclusion, especially when we consider a few other things. The first film that I would offer as the beginning of the DC United series is actually 300. I consider 300 as a part of the DC United series because Zack Snyder is obviously the director. This is the first film that he put out that is a DC publication, And throughout the DC films that he's made, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman especially, and some elements of Justice League, there's a lot of influence from Frank Miller himself, which is obviously the original writer of 300. But I also wanted to take the time and show you that it's more than that. The themes expressed in 300 are actually echoed through the DC universe later on in Man of Steel and especially Batman v Superman. And here are a few examples.
Immortals. They fail our king's test, and a man who fancies himself a god feels a very human chill crawl up his spine.
The idea of someone being regarded as a god and brought down to human emotion, to human feelings, to human fear is a theme expressed in 300 as well as in this scene.
Breathe it in. That's fear. You're not brave. Men are brave.
So that's a direct correlation with a godly regard being brought down to the fear of man. I think it's a very profound theme to be expressed in 300 as well as Batman v Superman, and I thought that it was a great idea to express the dynamic between Batman and Superman and how Bruce Wayne sees the potential of tyranny in Superman. Here's another example.
The world will know that free men stood against a tyrant, that few stood against many, and before this battle was over, that even a god king can bleed.
This is the setup for how a man can win against a god, and that is to disprove his godliness by making him bleed, by proving that he is not infallible.
Tell me. Do you bleed? You will.
There it is. The exact same setup. Batman is not going to win by any other method.
His shield was heavy and threw him off balance. His target is far away.
And there's the execution. This is the payoff, just like this scene.
You were never a god. You were never even a man.
Not only is it the same theme being expressed, the object being used is also a spear. It's echoing through the ages. So that's my extra reasoning for why 300 should be considered a part of the DC United series. Not only because it's the same creator, it's a similar style, and it's from the same original writer, Frank Miller, but also because the themes are echoed in both films, even in visuals. Another very direct way that 300 should be included in the DCU series is this scene from Wonder Woman.
With love and restore peace to the earth. Your mother, the Amazon Queen, led a revolt that freed us all from enslavement.
Not only is there the inclusion and continuation of Greek mythology in the DC universe through Wonder Woman, these are the Spartans. Let's continue with what else is included in the DC United series. Obviously, because I consider 300 as a part of the DC United series, I will consider its sequel also a part of the DC United series. I'm kind of a fan of the sequel. I know a lot of people didn't like it, but go back to it. It's really good. Rise of an Empire. Another one that I will include as a part of the DC United series, it's probably obvious to you by now, especially if you agree with me in considering 300 a part of the DC United series. Maybe it's a little left field for most people, but guess what? Flash is going to open up the universe and prove that this is a multiverse theory. It's Watchmen. Obviously, same director. These are DC characters. A lot of these Watchmen characters were based on the more mainstream DC characters. For example, Rorschach and Night Owl. They're actually the two personalities of Batman separated into two separate characters. A lot of people will argue that Rorschach is a little bit more like the Question because of the visuals, but as far as their use in the stories, those characters were always the dichotomy of Batman in both of his personalities, the detective Batman and the superhero, high-tech, wealthy Batman. Now again, I'm not just going to use the idea that it's the same creator, Zack Snyder, to prove that this is a part of the DCU series. I'm also going to bring in some story details and visuals to prove it as well.
Come gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown.
This is an obvious one. There's a Batman comic book poster in the top right on the wall. Night Owl is a Batman-inspired character. And obviously this is inferring that this is Thomas and Martha Wayne leaving the theater. I'm actually just noticing this now. That's Alfred in the corner too. Obviously, Zack Snyder likes to do a lot of slow-mo stuff, but the style is actually really, really similar to how he shot the actual Thomas and Martha scene in Batman v Superman. Oh man. No matter how many times you watch that scene, it always gets you. So my reasoning for considering Watchmen as a part of the DC United series, it's an Elseworld. It's part of the multiverse. Flash is bringing the multiverse into full frame. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is just an Elseworld where Night Owl stopped this from happening. So this is where we get to the main thrust of what the DC United series includes. If you want to disagree with me on those first inclusions, go ahead. But again, my main point here is to get rid of that other terminology and start referring to these films as really what they are, the DC United series or the DCU series. All of these films are connected in their characters, in the world that they live in, and Flash is even bringing in more versions of that world so that they can be united. Zack Snyder's Justice League, I think, was the first instance of a multiverse being shown to the audiences of the DC universe. So I'm really hopeful for the future. Another thing I'd like to mention here, since we're talking about the DCU series, a lot of people like to say the Snyderverse. The Snyderverse is dead. Do we have any hope for the Snyderverse? All of these films are the Snyderverse. All of these characters are stemming from Snyder's initial films. Even the Suicide Squad, even Peacemaker, this is a continuation of the Snyderverse. And that's another term that I think we should really get rid of, because DC is going to continue with whatever they're going to do, and it doesn't have to be with Snyder. James Wan turned in a great film with Aquaman. He's continuing with Aquaman 2, and that is Snyder's Aquaman. He chose the actor. He produced the film. So let's get rid of that terminology as well. This is the DC United series, and it doesn't have to be Snyder behind it. This can be taken by Patty Jenkins. This can be taken by James Wan. It can be James Gunn. It doesn't matter. If it's a continuation of these characters in these films in that same world, it's the DC United series. So let's get away from that other terminology. It's one thing. It's a DC United series, and it's going to keep going. We've got Peacemaker going on right now, and we've got a lot of upcoming films, including Black Adam, The Flash, bringing in more multiverse options for us. Even Michael Keaton. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, directed by James Wan. And Shazam! Fury of the Gods. This is directed by David F. Sandberg, which is a great director. I thought he did a really good job with the first Shazam movie. DC United. These are all of the films that connect to each other, the DCU series. I really want to thank Zack Snyder for his contribution. All of these films are absolutely beautiful. It's a great place to start off. His contributions to just filmmaking in general and the stylization of these films is incredible. The Suicide Squad was a great idea. Wonder Woman was his choice to bring in Gal Gadot. All of these films we owe to Zack Snyder, and it's not a bad thing to have to move on from Zack Snyder's creative vision. Zack Snyder is on to other things. Maybe he comes back in the future when he's a little bit less busy with his Netflix contract. I want to thank the guy because we got a great start to an awesome DC United series. In the comments, thanks Zack Snyder for everything he did. Let's get rid of that other terminology that doesn't make sense and we had no reason to use in the first place anyways. Let's call it what it is, the DC United series. We can do things like Joker. We can have things like the Batman. These are deeper explorations of character that don't need to be connected to anything else. So let's not hate on DC anymore. Let's embrace what they have. Let's embrace the two directions that they can go. The DC United series is going to keep going. We've got Flash coming up, which I'm super excited for, and Aquaman. And we've got the DC independent films like the Batman, which I'm also super excited for. I'm a fan of both of these series of films. Let's embrace it. So again, this is Orion. Let me know what you think of the new name for those DC films, the DC United series. Let me know what you think of my inclusions of 300 and Watchmen. Do you think that's fair? I definitely think it is. Also, give thanks to Zack Snyder for all his work and his contribution to getting these DC movies started. Have a good one, and subscribe while you're here.